On June 16, 2006, the racing world lost an amazing man, father, and husband. Fred Brownfield was known by many as a hard-working and dedicated man who loved the sport of racing and would do whatever he could to make sure his fans and drivers were taken care of. After a successful racing career consisting of 4 track championships at Skagit Speedway, Fred found his calling as a track promoter. Throughout his years as a promoter, he hit many milestones such as the creation of the Northern Sprint Tour A360 Sprint Car Series for the Northwest. The 2004 and 5 Promoter of the Year honors the creation of the National Sprint Tour, and was largely responsible for the return of the Outlaws on the Northwest after a 15-year absence. His untimely death in 2006 left a huge void in the racing community. Many say that Northwest sprint car racing hasn't really been the same since. From a promising national touring sprint car series to the eventual demise of that same series all in one year, in today's video we'll be looking back at the National Sprint Tour, what led to its downfall, and the life of Fred Brownfield. This is the tragic story of the National Sprint Tour. In 1972, Fred Brownfield began his racing career at Sky Valley Speedway in Monroe, Washington. He caught on to the sport quickly, even being named Rookie of the Year. He continued racing at Sky Valley up until the late 70s when the track shut its doors for good. He then moved on to Skagit Speedway, which is where he spent the rest of his racing career. Throughout his career, he claimed 4 track championships at Skagit, those being the 77, 80, 89, and 93 titles. Not only did he race locally, he also competed in several World of Outlaws events, and not just in the Northwest. These ranged from Silver Dollar Speedway to Devil's Bowl Speedway to Knoxville. In the research that I've done, I've counted 40 World of Outlaws events that Fred had competed in. 16 of those he had made the features, with his highest recorded finish being 9th in the 1989 Gold Cup Race of Champions. His most successful year with the Outlaws was in 1991, where he had made 9 out of the 11 attempts to make the features, his highest placements that year being 14th. I'm sure he had competed with other series as well, but given the time period and location he was racing in, it's quite difficult finding race results. For instance, his Third Turn page, a website used for tracking race results, only has 2 sections, those being the World of Outlaws and the Slick 50 Sprint Car World Series. After his final track championship in 1993, Fred hung up his fire suit after being given the opportunity to run Skagit Speedway. So both Fred and his wife Debbie took on this new challenge with one goal in mind: to make the Pacific Northwest the best in the business. Interesting enough, he was able to work with Ted Johnson, the World of Outlaws founder, in bringing back the series to the Northwest, as they hadn't been there since the late 1970s. In addition to this deal, Fred also got to promote these races for pretty much the rest of his life. This would be nicknamed the Wild Wild Northwest Tour. Through the years 1994 and 1995, the Brownfield family did an excellent job running the facility, making it one of the best. Fred actually planned on purchasing the track, but unfortunately that plan failed. So after that 95 season, he moved his promoting career over to Elma, Washington, reviving Grays Harbor Raceway. 1996 was a pivotal year not just for Fred, but the whole Northwest sprint car scene as well. That year he created the Northern Sprint Tour, a touring 360 sprint car series that traveled through Washington, Oregon, Montana, and even Alberta, Canada. A series like this was dire for the Northwest, as there wasn't much opportunities for drivers in the area. A series like this was exactly what they needed. One of the many things I found wholesome about Fred was that he always included his family on these adventures. One of his nieces said in an interview with Speed Sport, with his promotion of the Wild Wild Northwest Tour with the World of Outlaws, the first time he was at Billings, he put us on a Horizon Airlines flight and we flew into Billings. It was literally my entire family and his friends, and we showed up to work it. That was one of my most favorite trips with him. Fred was also a significant role in his nephew Travis Cram's racing career. Starting him off in go-kart, he then advanced to sprint car racing. Then came 1996. During the NST's infancy, Fred helped Travis get to Knoxville Raceway to pursue his dreams. Later that year, he went on to win the Front Row Challenge at Oskaloosa and was crowned Rookie of the Year. Throughout his career, he obtained 9 410 feature victories at Knoxville Raceway and placed 4th in points for the 02, 03, and 04 seasons. Travis is now a member of the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame.
I know you learned a lot from him, most of what you learned in sprint cars.
I did. I'll never forget my first time behind the wheel of a sprint car. I kind of, for those that didn't get to see my uncle race, he was somebody that put it up on the fence, usually all 4 above the cushion. And I'll never forget my first time behind the wheel. I was just happy to be out there and tooling around the bottom and come in after the races. My uncle came down and kind of gave me a stern pep talk. How many races you ever see me win? Running around the bottom, and that kind of ruined me from there on out, and I decided my career was all about hitting the fence.
The success of the Northern Sprint Tour named Fred the 2001 North American 360 Sprint Car Pole Promoter of the Year. He was then acknowledged for his efforts with the Outlaws, being awarded the 2004 and 5 World of Outlaws Promoter of the Year awards as well. Needless to say, he was impacting the sport tremendously. In late 2005, tensions were high between drivers and the new management of the Outlaws ever since the series was sold to Boundless Motorsports in late 2003. From how the series was ran to the limited exposure from the Outdoor Channel, drivers were fed up with the new management. In September of 2005, the Richard Petty driving experience revealed the National Sprint Car League, a competing series with the Outlaws. A total of 12 Outlaw drivers and teams signed a 3-year agreement with the series, most notably Steve Kinzer and Danny Lasowski. They also had the support from huge names like Casey Kane, Ken Schrader, Tony Stewart. The list goes on and on. In the series announcement, Kyle Petty revealed that the family looked into buying the Outlaws a few years prior, but decided to start their own series. Unfortunately, things went south for the National Sprint Car League in late 2005, and it never came into fruition. I do often wonder how the series would have turned out if it hadn't fell through. With racing royalty like the Petty family running the series, I have no doubt that it would have gotten a ton of attention from the racing world, especially the NASCAR community. The future was uncertain for the drivers who had signed with the National Sprint Car League, as the Outlaw season was right around the corner and they weren't too fond of the idea of returning. A series was gonna have to be formed quickly, so drivers turned to one man for help: Fred Brownfield. After all, he had been promoting for over 10 years, revived Northwest Sprint Car Racing as a whole, and had 2 World of Outlaws Promoter of the Year awards to his name. There was no man more qualified for an opportunity like this than Fred Brownfield. With slight hesitation, Fred accepted this opportunity, knowing how expensive it was gonna be. He was aware of the drivers' frustration with the Outlaws and that they were depending on him. So, funding the series out of pocket, Fred acquired the National Sprint Car League, then renamed it to the National Sprint Tour. The series was revealed in December of 2005 and only took a few weeks for Fred to come up with a schedule. A 36 race schedule was revealed during the 2006 Chili Bowl, with the season set to kick off at the Tulare Thunder Bowl in Tulare, California. The drivers' roster included Danny Lasowski, Steve Kinzer, Tim Kading, Jason Myers, Brian Polish, Shane Stewart, Tim Schaefer, Brandon Wimmer, Jason Sowald, Jason Sides, Lucas Wolf, and Paul McMahon. The series kicked off in November 24th and 25th, with Steve Kinzer putting on a clinic at Tulare, claiming both nights. A few weeks later, Steve's teammate Tim Kading in the 11K went on to win 2 nights in a row, those being at Southern New Mexico Speedway on March 10th and Bakersfield Speedway on March 18th. Up until June, it was pretty much back and forth between Danny Lasowski and Tim Kading, with the occasional wins from Tim Schaefer, Jason Myers, Jason Sowald, and even Mike Erdley, which was his one and only race with the series. Things were looking great for the National Sprint Tour, but unfortunately things started to go downhill after one fateful incident in June. Things took a tragic turn on June 16, 2006 during the Northwest Modified Nationals at Grays Harbor Raceway. While promoting the event, Fred Brownfield was lining up cars for the D-Main. With a couple of cars out of line, a driver on the top side of the track dove down to the inside, unaware of Fred's position. Fred was struck. Paramedics were on scene within a minute, but there wasn't much they could do. Fred was transported to the Mark Reed Hospital in McAlery and was pronounced dead later that evening. He was only 53. Word started to spread about Fred's death. One track in particular was Skagit Speedway during the Jim Raper Memorial Super Dirt Cup. The whole mood in the pits changed. Linwood driver Barry Martinez said, "It deflated the whole night, and we still had to go run our heat races. You try to block it out as best you can, but it's still there. We all have heavy hearts." As word spread throughout the pits during the second day of the Jim Raper Memorial Dirt Cup, the mood in the pits, already somber due to rain delay, dropped even further. The rest of the Northwest Nationals were canceled in respect for Fred Brownfield, and Skagit Speedway held a moment of silence and a memorial lap in his honor. In addition, drivers also voted to donate the total purse of $10,000 to the Brownfield family. Fred's death broke the hearts of many, especially fans and drivers of the Northwest region. He really did care about the sport, so much so that his name is still brought up frequently, and fans often get emotional about his passing. He loved being involved in the sport. It didn't matter if it was racing, promoting, or even spectating. If it was racing, Fred Brownfield was there, even till the end of his life, doing something that he loved. On June 21st, the National Sprint Tour held its first event since the passing of Fred at the Missouri State Fairgrounds. All drivers lined up on the front stretch for a moment of silence. Now, photos and footage of these events are hard to come by. I didn't think there would be a photo of this moment on the internet at all, but with lots of digging, I am happy to announce that I have found one. In part 1 of the Speed Sport article, Fred Brownfield Still Missed 17 Years Later, Craig Murphy, the man in charge for public relations for the NST, mentions this moment, and goes over how emotional it was for the drivers, especially Steve Kinser. The first race we did after was in Sedalia, Missouri. They had the drivers line up on the front stretch for a moment of silence. I have a picture of Steve Kinser crying. He's this tough-as-nails guy, nothing could ever bother him. Here he is on the front stretch crying. I think that spoke for all of us. Steve was really affected by the passing of Fred. They had gotten closer over the years, so much so that Steve had went to Fred personally asking for help after the National Sprint Car League had fell through. He knew how much he cared about his drivers and that if there was a series ran by Fred, they would be taken care of. Approximately a month after Fred's passing, the NST's assets were sold to 3 separate teams, those being Don Lamberti and Lonnie Parsons of Parsons Motorsports, Guy Stockbridge of Elite Racing, and Steve Kinser of Steve Kinser Racing. Danny Lasowski went on to claim the championship by a 92-point margin, with Steve Kinser coming in second. While he did place third in points, Tim Kading had a stellar year in the 11K, obtaining 15 victories and 24 top 5 finishes with the NST, the most wins in the season. On the flip side, Donnie Schatz went on to have his breakout year with the Outlaws, obtaining 19 victories, claiming his first World of Outlaws title. Management also changed early on in the season after Paul Kruger, the CEO of Dirt Motorsports, resigned. Then Tom Deary stepped in and became the new CEO. This was a turning point for the Outlaws as a new TV deal was made with ESPN2 and the Speed Channel for the 2007 season. Things started to spiral during the NST's offseason as many drivers were planning on returning to the Outlaws for the 2007 season, most importantly Steve Kinser and Danny Lasowski, the faces of the National Sprint Tour. A schedule for the 2007 season was never released, and the series met its demise later in the offseason. The National Sprint Tour was one of the 2 instances where a split occurred with the Outlaws, the first being in 1989 with the United Sprint Association. If you want to know the full story, I'll leave the link to my video in the description, but to sum it up briefly, it was a mess. A $3 million 47 race schedule was revealed for the 89 season, however, promoters of some of the tracks in the schedule never signed contracts with the series. From race cancellations, firings, absence of sponsors, television coverage, and an unrealistic points fund, it didn't stand a chance, especially after the resignation from Larry Clark, president of the series. Both of these splits only lasted 1 year, however, many people believe that if Fred hadn't passed away, the NST dynasty would have lasted. I mean, if you look at how successful it was under the Brownfield family and the fact that a title sponsor was going to be signed a week following Fred's death, there's no telling how long the series would have lasted. As far as the situation in the Northwest, the Northern Sprint Tour would be rebranded to the Northwest Sprint Challenge Series ran by Dick and Shauna Wilski for the 2007 season. In 2008, the American Sprint Car Series sanctioned a regional series under the ASCS Northwest, which ran until 2014. Other than a few state-focused series, there hasn't been any regional series over there since the closure of the ASCS Northwest. However, nothing has come close to the impact the Northern Sprint Tour had. As of Grays Harbor Raceway, the Brownfield family needed someone to take over as they signed a 10-year contract with Grays Harbor County in 2003. The track was handled by Great Northwest Promotions up until early 2014 when the track was bought by Steve Beitler of Funtime Promotions. It was then bought out by Bert Johnson, who still owns and promotes the track to this day. Grays Harbor Raceway is also home to the Fred Brownfield Classic. Its first inaugural race was held in 2007, although I'm not sure if this event is still going. Fred Brownfield was awarded the 2006 Outstanding Contribution to the Sport Award for his running of the National Sprint Tour, and 4 years later in 2010, he was inducted into the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame. I wanted to make this video because there doesn't seem to be much on YouTube about his life and the impact he's had on the sport. Sure, there may be articles online, but in today's day and age, videos like this are really important, especially stuff that is rarely talked about. Hell, I didn't even know about this until I was researching for the USA video. Fred was an amazing man, and I hope I was able to shine light on his story. His contributions still impact the sport to this very day, as his legacy still lives on in the hearts of many. From a successful racing career to becoming one of the most beloved figures in the region to a member of the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame, one thing's for certain: the name Fred Brownfield will never be forgotten. Thank you guys for tuning in to yet again another video. This one took me a lot of time to research. To be honest, I didn't think there would be much to it before I started working on the video, but I was completely wrong. It's taken me about a few weeks to make this, but I think it was worth it. I'd like to give a huge thanks to Dirt Track Racing by Strebfest for providing lots of footage from the Northwest. From my knowledge, he's the only person on YouTube that has posted footage of the National Sprint Tour events. I believe he uploaded both nights of the Big E weekend at Grays Harbor Raceway, so if you guys want to go watch those races in their entirety, I'll link the videos and his channel down in the description. But other than that, thank you guys for watching. This is Sly Job Dom, and I'll see you guys next time.